here is the dilemma for Democrats. Their young people, their key constituency, not only don't like their own civilization, they like the wrong one. They actually think Hamas is a liberation movement. They chant for the Houthis. They're chanting, "We will honor our martyrs" at Yale. They're looking for love in all the wrong countries. At an AOC Bernie Sanders rally in Idaho last month, someone threw a Palestinian flag over an American flag, and the crowd erupted in approval. What should have happened after that is one of the adults on stage should have told their young, loyal followers, "This is not a symbol of freedom. This is."
What happens when Bill Maher finally snaps harder than your conspiracy-loving uncle after his third whiskey at Thanksgiving? You get something less like a late-night monologue and more like a detonation. A full-blown verbal nuke aimed squarely at AOC and the progressive elite, with fallout guaranteed to trigger anyone within ideological earshot. This wasn't Maher being cute or coy. This was Maher lighting the fuse on a truth bomb and lobbing it straight into the left's safe space. Apparently, saying you love your country is now a hate crime. Who knew patriotism would become the new taboo? If you thought political discourse couldn't get any messier, Maher just threw a rhetorical Molotov into the liberal echo chamber and walked away in slow motion. Listen to this before Twitter decides this is the 47th time he needs canceling. Just for pointing out the obvious.
Robotic tripods could be vaporizing New Jersey. Democrats would point out how the death lasers were disproportionately affecting low-income communities and people of color, and AOC would tweet, "Stop demonizing the Martian X community."
Bill Maher finally snapped, not in the flip-a-desk, scream-at-an-and-turn way, but in the cold, surgical fashion of a comedian philosopher with a vendetta against ideological nonsense. This was the intellectual equivalent of a sniper shot. Clean, precise, and lethal. The target, his own side. Because apparently, even Maher's sarcasm has had enough of progressive sanctimony masquerading as moral superiority. For a guy who made a living roasting the right, it was a plot twist no one saw coming, like Gandalf joining the dark side just to call out the Jedi for whining too much. The guy didn't just clap back, he lit up the progressive wing of his own ideological backyard like a 4th of July barbecue run by libertarians. And AOC? She may not have been mentioned by name, but her ears were definitely burning.
As a Democrat, you were there with him, but he does seem to be the voice of reason in that party these days.
No question, and he was 100% correct when he said it on air the other day, and I couldn't agree with him more. The fact is, you don't see them marching in the streets or storming buildings in support of Laken Riley, who was murdered by an illegal immigrant, or for Edon Alexander, who is now rescued from captivity.
So Maher's talking to Ilhan Omar, and for a brief, surreal moment, it feels like he's the only adult left in the Democratic Party playpen. You could practically hear jaws hit the floor when he agreed, out loud, on air, that maybe, just maybe, outrage shouldn't be selective. That maybe we should march for murdered Americans, not just for hashtag trends and TikTok-approved causes. He wasn't just right. He was crystal clear in a sea of ideological sludge. No, there weren't mobs storming buildings or flooding city squares for Riley, the young woman murdered by an illegal immigrant. No candlelight vigils. No murals. Just silence. Because apparently some lives are more useful to the narrative than others. And Maher wasn't having it. He called it like it is. Not Republican, not Democrat, just sane. Which, ironically, might be the most rebellious thing you can be in 2025.
The thought leaders in the Democratic Party keep encouraging and not rebuking the idea that America is cringe and the people who run Gaza are great. The Democrats are doomed. Alyssa Slotkin's right. Liberals are weak and woke, especially the white ones, and they indulge all sorts of nonsense from their kids. So talk to your children and remind them you don't really want to live like your heroes in Hamas. All the you do all day, it was all made in America. Your smartphone, your Grubhub, your freedom to bitch about America, that's all Americans.
Let's be clear, this wasn't Maher tossing shade. This was scorched earth satire, flamethrower comedy, a verbal drone strike delivered with surgical precision. And the target? AOC and the Cathedral of Progressive Despair. Maher didn't just roll his eyes at the cult of modern left-wing performative patriotism. He torched it like it was a damp copy of the Communist Manifesto at a libertarian bonfire. The trigger? That soul-sucking kabuki theater where loving your country is treated like a microaggression and pledging allegiance feels like an act of right-wing sedition. Maher wasn't just criticizing a political party. He was calling out a generation of activists who think patriotism is outdated, and grievance is a virtue. And he didn't whisper. He shouted. With jokes.
Bob, standing up to my withering questioning about the Republicans. Now let's get to the Democrats. Okay. Now here's the problem for all the people who are upset about what the Republicans are doing. This was in the New York Times of all places this week. Democratic parties. Many Americans say they do not believe the Democratic Party is focused on the issues that matter most to them. So if you think all this Trump stuff is going to go away because the other party is going to come in, well, that may not be the case.
This wasn't a critique. This was a eulogy for common sense, officiated by the last liberal who still reads newspapers instead of retweets. Maher didn't show up to scold. He came to bury. With biting humor and an exasperated shrug, he took aim at the holy trinity of modern leftist martyrdom, eternal victimhood, grievance Olympics, and the non-stop effort to cancel America like it's a problematic episode of Friends. He wasn't mocking liberal values. He was mourning their death by committee, hijacked by a chorus of professional malcontents who won't rest until every mural, mascot, and mention of patriotism is declared toxic. Maher came to ask a simple question. When did progressivism become allergic to joy? And judging by the online meltdowns that followed, it's a question no one on the left wants to answer.
And finally, Nero, let's hear it for Democratic politicians who keep it real. Senator Alyssa Slotkin of Michigan says Democrats are, quote, weak and woke and should get some goddamn alpha energy and need to retake the flag. I gotta say this.
Great job grilling Republicans, Maher says. But now let's talk about the mess in your own backyard. Cue the panic. Because Maher didn't pull this from a right-wing blog or Fox News. He quoted the New York Times, yes, that New York Times, reporting that Democrats are increasingly seen as out of touch with the issues people actually care about. You know, the real world. Inflation, safety, jobs. That dusty old list. While half the country obsesses over whether Trump held his Diet Coke wrong, the other half is wondering why eggs cost more than Bitcoin and why every solution from the left involves banning gas stoves and making drag brunches part of the school curriculum. Maher wasn't pointing fingers. He was holding up a mirror. And it wasn't flattering. In Maher's America, loving your country isn't about dressing like a bald eagle at a monster truck rally. It's about nuance, adult conversations, and acknowledging that yes, this place is flawed, but no, it's not irredeemable. But try saying that online today and watch the cancel mob rev up faster than a Tesla at a Greenpeace fundraiser. Maher torched the trend of performative activism, the one where waving an American flag gets you side-eyed like you just recited the Pledge of Allegiance in a drum circle. He didn't need AOC in the room. He aimed at the ideology, that relentless sermonizing campaign that treats patriotism like a dirty word, the anthem like hate speech, and history like a rap sheet from hell. And he reminded everyone that dissent isn't treason, and calling out your side isn't betrayal, it's survival. Bill Maher, the equal opportunity offender with a standing invite to both cancel culture and common sense, finally unloaded. No, he didn't go nuclear on one person. He went existential on an entire worldview. The performative outrage. The America bashing. The idea that being a Democrat now requires a permanent scowl and a master's in victim studies. Maher said what half the country's thinking and the other half's too scared to tweet. Maybe hating the country that gave you freedom, fame, and an iPhone with Face ID is just a little ungrateful. And while he didn't say AOC every 5 seconds, her brand of TikTok thespian activism was written all over it like activist graffiti on a Whole Foods wall. Maher didn't beg for applause. He begged for nuance. But as he knows all too well, nuance has been exiled somewhere between common sense and moderate Democrats. And until it returns, Maher's going to keep torching sacred cows like a political arsonist with a punchline.